The phone rang at 2:00 a.m. Sleep broke without resistance. The screen lit up on the nightstand, and a name appeared that no longer belonged to the living. My daughter's name. The same contact photo I had never removed. A thumb hovered, unsure whether answering would make things worse. The call connected. Dad opened the door. I'm cold. The voice was small, familiar in a way that didn't make sense. Not distorted, not rushed, just close. What did you say? Dad opened the door. I'm cold. No explanation followed, no background noise, breathing slow and steady, then nothing. The call ended. The phone stayed in my hand, while the house remained exactly as it was a moment before. No alarms, no movement. The security app opened without thought, fingers moving from habit rather than panic. The doorbell camera feed loaded. A child stood close to the front step, shoulders pulled in a hood covering most of the face. The height was wrong. Too small. Still, the posture carried something that belonged to memory. The way the feet angled inward. The stillness. Opening the door felt reckless. Keys went into a jacket pocket instead. Shoes slipped on without laces. Rather than going straight ahead, the path curved around the side of the house, cutting through the yard toward the back fence. A shape rested near the hedge. Closer now, the hood slipped back. My granddaughter's face came into view, pale lips pressed tight. Her hands were bare. One of them clutched a phone I recognized immediately. The old iPhone my daughter used to carry everywhere. The screen was cracked the same way it had been for years. What are you doing here? Her shoulders shook before any sound came out. He locked the door, she said. I knocked. He didn't come back. How long were you out here? She shrugged. That was answer enough. The car door closed behind us a minute later. Heat blasted from the vents. The phone rested on the passenger seat between us, screen dark now. No questions followed. No promises either. Hand stayed on the steering wheel while the engine pulled us away from the block. Streetlights slid past. The child leaned into the seat, eyes open but unfocused. Fingers curled into the sleeve of my jacket without asking permission. Are we going to the hospital? She asked. Yes. Am I in trouble? No. Is Dad going to be mad? The road ahead stayed clear. You don't have to worry about that right now. The sliding doors parted and closed again before anyone asked questions. A nurse guided us down a hallway and handed my granddaughter a thin blanket, while another staff member took her temperature and pulse. Her shoes were damp. The phone stayed in my coat pocket this time. At the intake desk, a clipboard appeared. Relationship to the patient grandfather. Parent available. Not at the moment. That answer went into the computer without comment. A second nurse asked for a name and date of birth, then glanced up. Where's her father? He wasn't home. Nothing more needed to be added. Filling in gaps would only create others. My phone vibrated again. Daniel's name lit up the screen, then disappeared. A few seconds later, it returned. The device went face down on the counter. The nurse continued typing. A pediatric resident came by, knelt to my granddaughter's level, and asked how she was feeling. She answered in short phrases, voice steady but thin. The resident nodded and left notes on the chart. Minutes stretched without ceremony. Hospital routines carried on around us, each person doing their part without urgency or alarm. A security officer passed by and slowed, then kept moving. Someone wheeled a cart past the waiting chairs. Another nurse approached. We've contacted Child Protective Services. It's standard when a child comes in alone this late. That's fine. Someone will speak with you shortly. The call from Daniel came again. This time a voicemail followed. No message played. The phone stayed where it was. A woman introduced herself a few minutes later, offering a badge before saying her name. Elena Morales, CPS. She didn't rush her questions. She didn't soften them either. A small notebook, opened pen ready. Who has primary custody? Her father. And tonight she was locked out. How long, I don't know. Has this happened before? Not that I'm aware of. Any history of neglect, none reported. Each answer landed on paper without reaction. Elena asked where my granddaughter usually stayed during the week, who picked her up from school, who handled medical appointments. The responses stayed factual. Speculation would only blur the record. The doctor returned with results. She's stable. No signs of acute injury. We want to keep her a bit longer and have psych take a look in the morning. Thank you. My granddaughter shifted on the chair, watching the hallway, rather than the adults speaking around her. Can I have some water? She asked. Of course, the nurse said, already moving. Footsteps approached faster than the rest. Daniel appeared at the end of the hall, breath uneven, jacket half zipped. Relief crossed his face when he saw his daughter. Then his eyes landed on me. There's been a misunderstanding, he said to no one in particular. She got mad and ran off. I was out looking for her. Elena stepped forward. Sir, I'm with CPS. We'll need to talk. Of course, he said quickly. I'm just glad she's okay. Daniel bent toward his daughter. Why didn't you stay put? She didn't answer. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor. The doctor explained the plan again. Daniel nodded through it, repeating key phrases as if to show he'd been listening. When Elena asked to speak with him privately, he hesitated, then agreed. Can I see her first? He asked. In a moment, Elena replied. The separation happened without drama. Daniel followed Elena down the hall. A nurse guided my granddaughter to a small room for observation. The door remained partly open. A social worker checked on her again, then left. From the waiting area, Daniel's voice carried uneven now, not loud enough to hear words, but enough to sense strain. The cadence changed, rising and falling. Elena's responses stayed measured. A nurse returned with a form. We'll need your signature for treatment authorization as next of kin since her father's unavailable right now. Okay. The pen felt heavier than usual. Ink dried quickly on the page. Another call buzzed through the phone. A text followed this time. Why didn't you answer? You're making this worse than it is. The screen went dark again. A few minutes later, Elena came back alone. We'll be taking statements separately, she said. For now, your granddaughter will remain here. What about tonight? She won't be going home yet. Across the hall, Daniel stood with his back to us, talking to a nurse. His shoulders stayed tense, movements clipped. When he turned, our eyes met briefly. He looked past me almost immediately. The nurse signaled that visiting time was limited. I followed her to the room, pulled a chair close, and sat where my granddaughter could see me. She held the cup with both hands, sipping slowly. Am I staying here? She asked. For a little while. Are you leaving? No, miss. She leaned back against the pillow. The monitor ticked steadily beside her. Outside the room, voices continued overlapping with pages and footsteps. Elena returned with a folder tucked under her arm, the kind that usually means a longer conversation. She didn't sit right away. She scanned the hallway, then took the chair across from me. We pulled the family file, she said. There's a financial guardianship request from Daniel. It was submitted months ago. For what purpose? Managing funds tied to your daughter's estate, insurance, survivor benefits. He listed himself as the sole administrator. The words landed without drama, which made them heavier. Paperwork like that doesn't appear by accident. It requires intent, timing, persistence. After the funeral, Daniel had stepped forward before anyone asked. He offered to organize documents, said it would be easier if one person handled everything. Grief had made me agreeable. Less friction felt like kindness back then. He kept copies, I asked. Elena nodded. Everything. He's been following up regularly. A nurse approached us shortly after, her expression hesitant. Sir, I just wanted to let you know. He asked about the life insurance policy earlier, about the payout schedule. While your granddaughter was still being evaluated, did you give him information? No. We couldn't. The nurse apologized anyway, then walked off. That detail shifted something. Curiosity crossed into calculation. Timing mattered. Elena watched my face carefully. We're opening a temporary monitoring file, she said. No conclusions yet, just documentation. That makes sense. If there's anything you remember that might be relevant, I'll let you know. Daniel didn't return to the waiting area. Instead, he sent a message asking to talk. A few minutes later, he appeared near the exit, motioning toward the parking structure. I followed. The air outside felt heavier than expected. He leaned against a concrete pillar, rubbing his forehead. This is getting blown out of proportion, he said. I'm under a lot of pressure. Bills, childcare. Everything hit at once. I understand stress, I said. You know I'd never hurt her. You know that. She was outside. For a few minutes, he replied quickly. She knows how dramatic she can be. A folded packet came out of his jacket pocket. I just need you to sign something. Temporary authorization. It'll help streamline things. The pages stayed between us. I'm not signing anything tonight. It's routine, he insisted. You're making this harder. Then it can wait. Silence followed. His jaw tightened. The papers went back into his pocket. You always think you know better, he said. You didn't even like me at first. This isn't about that. Everything with you turns into control. The accusation hung there without response. Arguing would only sharpen it. Take care of her, he said finally. I'll sort things out. He walked away before an answer could be offered. CPS cleared us to leave later that night. Temporary placement paperwork listed my address. The nurse helped my granddaughter gather her things. The phone her mother once used was returned in a sealed bag, labeled for evidence review. The drive home passed without conversation. She leaned against the window, eyes open but distant. The house greeted us without ceremony. A light flipped on in the kitchen. Shoes came off by the door. Can I sleep in the guest room? She asked. Of course. A blanket was pulled from the closet. Water filled a glass. She climbed into bed without protest. The house settled into its usual rhythm. I stayed in the living room, paperwork spread across the table, reading words that felt heavier the longer they were examined. Had stepping in crossed a line, or had waiting too long created this opening? A notification chimed from the laptop. An email from the hospital system time-stamped earlier that evening. Subject line, unauthorized access alert. The message detailed a login attempt tied to records labeled maternal estate. The name attached wasn't mine. The phone rang shortly after 8. CPS identified themselves before I could finish my first cup of coffee. The tone stayed professional, measured, rehearsed. There's been a formal complaint filed, the caseworker said. Daniel Brooks alleges unauthorized interference with custodial rights. What does that mean for today? We need you to return your granddaughter to her father while we verify the claims. There's a review scheduled for later this week. The words arrived already finalized. No argument would change the sequence. After the call ended, my granddaughter stood at the end of the hallway, dressed but not moving. Do I have to go back? She asked. Yes. Her fingers wrapped around my hand. No tears, no raised voice. Just pressure, steady and deliberate, as if holding tighter might slow the process. The drive across town took longer than expected. Traffic lights, school zones, morning routines continuing as usual. She watched the road face unreadable. Will you be here later? I'll be close. Okay. Daniel's house looked unchanged from the street. The door opened after the second knock. He stepped aside, posture relaxed, voice even. "This is being handled properly now," he said. "You didn't need to involve outside agencies." "They contacted us," I replied. He gestured toward the living room. My granddaughter let go of my hand and walked ahead without looking back. The house felt rearranged. Her backpack rested against a different wall. Shoes that usually stayed by the door were gone. A stack of her books sat on a shelf near the hallway, neatly aligned, no longer in her room. Daniel noticed the glance. "I reorganized," he said. "She needs structure." A locked cabinet stood near the dining area keyhole, newly polished from use. Papers were visible through the glass, clipped and labeled. "Everything's documented," he added. "Completely legal. No response followed. There was nothing to gain from challenging the claim in his living space." My granddaughter returned with her coat. She stood between us, eyes fixed on the floor. "I'll call later," I said. She nodded once. The drive back felt shorter, emptier. A notification buzzed before the next intersection. A message from my attorney appeared on the dashboard screen. "Daniel filed amended documents with the estate trust this morning. Temporary access restrictions are in place. We'll need to respond quickly." Hands tightened on the wheel. Losing access wasn't unexpected, but the timing confirmed intent. Another alert followed. Bank access limited. Automatic payments paused. At home, the laptop came out. Files loaded slowly, one after another. Statements, emails, scanned forms from years earlier. Each page told the same story in a different font. An email from Elena Morales arrived before noon. "Michael, your granddaughter has been placed on a short-term psychological observation list through her school. This is procedural, not disciplinary. I'll update you after the review." The message stayed open longer than necessary. Being monitored was different from being protected, but it was still better than being ignored. Folders spread across the table. My daughter's handwriting appeared on old notes tucked between official forms. Dates, account numbers, a beneficiary designation that hadn't been updated after her marriage. Another document stood out. A copy of a power of attorney request unsigned filed shortly after the funeral. Daniel's name appeared at the top. The witness line was blank. The clock moved past noon without notice. Lunch stayed untouched. The house stayed occupied but unsettled, as if expecting another interruption. A voicemail came through from Daniel. "I don't want this to get ugly," he said. "You're overstepping. Let the system work." The system had already started, just not in my favor. A legal pad filled with notes replaced the open files. Dates aligned, requests overlapped. Access attempts matched the hospital alert from the night before. This wasn't reaction. It was preparation. The conference room at CPS had no decorations, just a long table and too many chairs. Elena Morales sat near the end with a folder already open. Daniel arrived a few minutes later with his attorney, a man in a gray suit who shook hands as if this were a routine appointment. My own lawyer joined by phone voice coming through a small speaker placed in the center of the table. Daniel spoke first. "I'm her legal guardian," he said. "I've never restricted contact. What's happening now is emotional interference." Elena looked at him without reacting. "Please continue." "He's grieving." Daniel went on, nodding in my direction. "I understand that. But involving agencies taking her overnight without consent, that crosses a line." No interruption followed. Silence worked in his favor. When it was my turn, the questions came framed around what I hadn't done. No prior reports. No documented concerns. No objections on record before that night. "You didn't raise concerns earlier," Elena said. "That will be noted." "That's correct," I replied. Avoiding conflict had always seemed like restraint, Now it read as consent. Daniel's attorney slid a packet across the table. Financial statements, trust documents, a formal request granting Daniel expanded authority over funds tied to my daughter's estate. This ensures stability, the attorney said. The child's needs are ongoing. Those funds weren't meant to replace supervision, my lawyer said through the speaker. They were designated for long-term care. And that's exactly what my client is providing, Daniel answered. Structure. Consistency. Elena tapped her pen once. At this stage, she said, custody remains with the father. However, access to financial accounts will be limited pending review. Daniel leaned back, relief visible for the first time that morning. The limitation barely registered with him. Control mattered more than cash. The meeting ended without ceremony. No handshakes this time. Papers gathered. Chairs pushed back. Walking out felt like moving through someone else's decision. The sidewalk outside carried normal foot traffic. Parents with strollers, office workers on lunch break. Nothing marked the shift that had just taken place. The phone rang as I reached the car. The school number flashed on the screen. Mr. Turner, the counselor said. She had a panic episode today. Difficulty focusing. She asked to call you. Did she say what triggered it? She mentioned being afraid to go home. Is she safe right now? Yes. We're monitoring. The call ended with reassurances that didn't travel far. That evening, paperwork covered the dining table again. Legal definitions blurred together. Custody, guardianship, temporary authority. Each word carried weight without warmth. Dinner went untouched. A voicemail from Daniel arrived shortly after. This didn't need to turn into a fight, he said. You're forcing things. The message stayed unheard past that first line. The attorney called next. If you escalate, it becomes a long process, he warned. Costly, public. And if I don't, then this stands. No advice followed. Just the reality of options narrowing. A photo fell out of one of the folders. My daughter and her child at the park, both mid-laugh, unaware of anything that would follow. The back held a date written in pen. A week before the diagnosis. The phone buzzed again. Another message from the school counselor with an update. She's calmer now. Asked if you're coming to the next meeting. A reply went out without hesitation. Yes. The choice stopped feeling theoretical. The briefcase opened again. Files sorted by date this time. A timeline emerged. The guardianship request, the insurance inquiry, the hospital login attempt. Each action stood alone until placed together. One more document surfaced, buried deeper than the rest. A beneficiary change request drafted, but never submitted. My daughter's signature line, blank. Elena agreed to meet after hours at a small cafe a few blocks from her office. No badges, no forms, just two people sitting across from each other with paper cups between us. She chose the corner table back to the wall. I can't advise you, she said before anything else. But I can clarify what's already on record. That's all I'm asking for. She opened her notebook, flipped to a page marked with a folded corner. There was an unauthorized access attempt on the hospital system, she said. Same night your granddaughter was admitted. Daniel. Yes. Logged in under a provider credential he shouldn't have had. What was he looking for? Records tied to your daughter. Estate notes. Insurance references. That confirmed what had felt like coincidence before. Timing aligned too neatly to ignore. We flagged it, Elena continued. Compliance is reviewing. Does that matter for custody? Not directly. But it matters for pattern. The word stayed with me. My attorney called during the meeting. Elena stepped away without comment. They ran a preliminary review, he said. The signature on the estate addendum doesn't match prior samples. There are signs of digital alteration. So it's not valid, it's questionable, which is enough to contest. Hope surfaced briefly, then stalled. Contesting wasn't winning. It was just staying alive longer. When the call ended, Elena returned to the table. CPS scheduled a re-evaluation, she said. 72 hours. And if nothing new comes up, then the current arrangement holds. The implication didn't need spelling out. Driving home, the dashboard lit up with another alert. Bank notification. Account access restricted. A second message followed, more specific. Certain transactions temporarily unavailable. Daniel had moved quickly, faster than expected. A call to the bank confirmed it. The request came from the authorized guardian, the representative said. Until it's resolved, limits apply. I use that account for her expenses, I understand. I'm sorry. Understanding didn't restore access. The grocery receipt stayed on the counter longer than usual that night. A note from the school counselor waited in the inbox. She asked for you again today. We're managing. Managing felt like another word for waiting. Bills stacked near the sink. A payment notification failed to process. The system sent a reminder without context, as if this were routine. Paperwork returned to the table. Every document reread, this time with a different eye. Not grief, not patience. Pattern. The attorney called again. If he's freezing accounts, he's trying to force your hand, he said. You'll need to respond formally. How file for emergency review. Present what you have. And if it's not enough, then you'll know. The call ended without comfort. A text came through from Daniel shortly after. We can fix this if you stop pushing. No reply followed. Later that night, the laptop chimed again. An email from CPS, Michael. The re-evaluation hearing is scheduled for Friday at 9 a.m. Please submit any additional documentation by Thursday evening. The timeline tightened. The printer started again. Hospital alerts, bank notices, email headers. Metadata mattered now. Each timestamp carried weight. A small knock sounded at the bedroom door. Are you still awake? My granddaughter asked. Yes. She stepped in holding a book she hadn't opened. They said I might talk to someone tomorrow, she said. At school. That's okay. Will you be there as soon as I can? She nodded and returned to her room without waiting for more. Back at the table, one last folder remained unopened. Notes my daughter kept for herself. Appointments, password hints, a list labeled just in case. A Logan detail matched the hospital alert. The access point Daniel used traced back to a shared device. That wasn't coincidence. It was proximity. The phone rang once more. This time the attorney didn't wait. We can file tonight, he said. But once we do, there's no pulling back. Do it. The briefcase reopened. Documents slid into place with less hesitation than before. A plan didn't need certainty. It needed direction. The documents landed on the table, one stack at a time. Emails first, then account histories. Then the notes my daughter had kept for herself, dates, circled reminders written in a hand that no longer corrected itself. Elena Morales flipped through them without comment. The CPS supervisor beside her paused more often, checking timestamps, comparing names. My attorney spoke when needed, nothing more. The pattern begins immediately after the funeral, he said. Requests for access. Attempts to consolidate control. None of it disclosed. Daniel sat across the table, posture stiff. His attorney leaned close, whispering, but Daniel waved him off. That doesn't prove anything, Daniel said. I was trying to protect my daughter. By changing beneficiaries? Elena asked. By accessing hospital records without authorization. Daniel's response came too fast. I had permission. From whom? My wife. She was already deceased, Elena replied. The room stayed still after that. No raised voices, no warning looks, just the sound of paper being turned. The CPS supervisor pointed to a printed email. This was sent 3 days after the burial, she said. You asked the insurance carrier to expedite payment. We had expenses. You asked again 2 weeks later, the supervisor continued. And again, the month after. Daniel's foot tapped against the floor. His attorney finally stepped in. My client was under stress. Grief affects judgment. Grief doesn't grant access to restricted systems, Elena said, or explain why a child was locked out of her home at night. Daniel leaned forward. She left on her own. The call log says otherwise, Elena replied, and the hospital access attempt was made while she was still being treated. The questions tightened. Timing, location, devices used. Each answer Daniel gave contradicted the last. A denial turned into a justification. A justification became a complaint about being misunderstood. My role in the room changed without effort. There was no need to speak now. Silence stopped being absence and became space. The CPS supervisor closed the folder. Based on the information presented, she said, "We're issuing an emergency order." Daniel's head lifted. For what temporary suspension of custodial rights? The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. "This is a mistake," Daniel said, standing. "You can't do this. We can," Elena replied. "And we are." A uniformed officer appeared at the doorway, not dramatic, just present. Another followed. "Sir," one of them said, "we need to ask you some questions regarding financial records and possible document alteration." Daniel's voice rose, then broke. "This is harassment," he said. "He manipulated all of this. No one looked in my direction." The officers guided Daniel out of the room. His attorney followed, already making calls. Elena turned back to me. "She's cleared to leave with you," she said. "Effective immediately." Paperwork came next. Signatures, initials. A temporary placement order slid across the table. The pen felt familiar again. In the waiting area, my granddaughter sat with her backpack between her feet. She looked up when she saw me, eyes searching before settling. "Are we going?" she asked. "Yes." She stood without hesitation. No glance toward the hallway Daniel had disappeared down. No questions. The elevator ride passed without conversation. Her hand found mine halfway down, grip firm, but calm. Outside, the afternoon continued. Cars moved through the intersection. Someone laughed near the entrance. Life refused to pause. "Do I have to go back?" she asked once we reached the car. "No. For how long? We'll take it one day at a time." She nodded, accepting the answer as complete. The drive home felt different, not lighter, but steadier. A message came through from the attorney confirming the police report had been filed. Another from the bank acknowledged receipt of the emergency order. At the house, shoes came off by the door. Her backpack dropped near the couch. The routine returned in pieces. "Can I call my friend?" she asked. "Yes." The phone she used this time wasn't her mother's old one. That device stayed in a drawer, no longer needed as proof. In the kitchen, water filled the kettle. Paperwork rested where it had for days, but the weight had shifted. Still there, still serious, but no longer pressing from all sides. A notification buzzed on the counter. An unknown number. I didn't answer. Dinner came together without planning. Plates set, chairs pulled back. "Are you mad?" she asked suddenly. "No." At him. "That's not important right now." She accepted that too. Later, as she settled into the guest room again, Elena's email came through. "The investigation will continue. I'll be in touch." The courtroom emptied without ceremony. No raised voices, no final outbursts. Just the scrape of chairs and the soft shuffle of papers being gathered. Daniel stood when instructed, listened while charges were read, then sat again. Fraud, forgery, child endangerment. The words sounded administrative, stripped of drama, as if they belonged to someone else. Custody transferred with a signature and a stamp. That part took less than 5 minutes. Outside, my attorney summarized next steps. Appeals were possible. Timelines uncertain. None of it required a response right then. A clerk handed over certified copies. I placed them in a folder and didn't open it again. There was no need to look back into the courtroom. Daniel didn't turn around. Neither did I. Life reorganized itself slowly after that. Not with relief, but with structure. Mornings shifted first. Breakfast became a shared task. One of us packed lunches while the other checked backpacks. School drop-offs fit between conference calls. My manager adjusted my schedule without asking for details. "Take what you need," he said. "We'll manage coverage." That was all. The house adapted. The guest room stopped being temporary. Clothes filled the dresser. Shoes returned to the doorway. The phone my daughter once carried stayed in a drawer powered off. It no longer belonged to the present. Daniel's name surfaced occasionally. A notice from the court, a brief mention from the attorney. His accounts frozen, access revoked, friends distancing themselves. None of it required attention. Silence served better than updates. What stayed was the lesson I hadn't wanted to learn. Keeping peace by saying nothing had given someone else permission. Boundaries hadn't been cruelty. They had been neglected. That understanding arrived without bitterness, just clarity. Weekends changed next. At Elena's suggestion, we started walking the state parks nearby. Nothing ambitious. Trails with benches and clear paths, space to move without urgency. Do we have to talk the whole time, she asked the first morning? No. Good. We walked side by side. Sometimes she skipped ahead. Sometimes she lagged behind kicking stones. Conversation surfaced when it wanted to. School. A book she was reading. A classmate who talked too much. Once halfway through a loop, she stopped. "You didn't leave," she said. "No. Even when it got hard. That wasn't a question." She nodded and started walking again. Paperwork still arrived. Forms to finalize. Reviews to complete. The process didn't disappear. It just stopped dominating the room. Each document went into its place and stayed there. Work returned to its usual rhythm. System checks. Maintenance schedules. Problems with clear solutions. The predictability helped. Some nights after she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and reread notes from months earlier. Emails, timelines. The point where silence had seemed easier than conflict. The cost of that choice stayed visible, but it no longer accused. Forgiveness never came up. Not with Daniel? Not with anyone else? It didn't need to. Distance handled what forgiveness usually pretended to solve. One afternoon, a message came through from an unknown number. No name, no context. I didn't mean for it to go this far. The phone stayed face down. Dinner finished cooking. Plates were set. "What's that?" she asked, glancing at the counter. "Nothing we need to answer. Okay." We ate, talked about a science project due next week, argued briefly over vegetables. The ordinary things held their ground. Later, as dishes dried on the rack, she sat at the table, drawing. A house, 2 figures, no labels. "Is this us?" I asked, "if you want it to be." The drawing went onto the fridge without commentary. That night, the house settled into its familiar sounds. A door closed down the hall. Water ran, then stopped. Lights went off one by one. Tomorrow would bring more adjustments, meetings, school emails, work deadlines. None of it felt like an ending. Just continuation. The kind that keeps what matters and leaves the rest where it belongs.